All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining SDA Seattle. We are super excited to have you here, and we are recording this. A link to the presentation will be sent out later. We're going to keep everybody's mics muted unless you've got a speaking part. Keep it nice and clean. Please use the chat box for questions, and we're going to save those mostly till the end. So as you come up with a question, please drop it in the chat box so that our speaker can address them later, okay? All right, I'm going to pass the baton over to Georgianne, who's going to introduce our speaker today.
Thank you so much, Carrie. It's my pleasure to introduce Candy Castellanos, who I've known since she started consulting at KPG almost 3 years ago. Candy's been the fearless guide and co-creator of KPG's 5-year plan, providing strategic planning, process mapping, leadership development coaching, and organizational development to KPG that is grounded in our culture and our values, helping us align our abilities with our intentions and maximize our potential as we grow. Candy's bio notes her numerous awards, but I'd like to add that in my personal experience with her as a coach and facilitator, that her extraordinary depth of knowledge of emotional intelligence creates the most compassionate space for authentic growth that I've ever experienced. I'm excited to learn from her today and can't thank Candy enough for sharing her insightful perspective with SDA on ways to structure our time in meaningful ways. Thank you.
Georgianne, thank you so much. I really appreciate the introduction and really appreciate SDA for the opportunity to be here and share some of the things I've learned along the way, my ideas and resources. I'm going to share my screen and get everything set up. Just to note for everybody, my preference is always to present in person. With the pandemic, everybody's had to adapt in a zillion different ways. And so if we were in person, note that there's a lot more that I would have done that was very hands-on and interactive. But at the end of the PowerPoint, I do share my phone number and my email. So any questions or any things that you want to bounce off of me after the presentation, please feel free to reach out. So, so away we go. Let's see. Let me just move some things around. Okay, and just a reminder, please feel free to post questions as you have them, but note that we're not going to look at the questions until the very end. Just to be as effective and efficient with the time as we can. All right. So today we're going to be talking about harnessing time and wanting to acknowledge basically the tendency that many of us are drawn into, which is kind of reactive busyness with intention and with balance. And so the topics we're going to be covering is I'm going to give a brief orientation around what the emotional intelligence framework is, acknowledge what is our lay of the land, and then talk through time management and time planning, looking at how time evades us, and then dive into a model for purpose-driven planning, how to best manage distractions, how to communicate around resetting expectations, boundaries, and choices, looking at some of the key organizational tools that I've come across in my work and found very helpful, and then want to close with a conversation around mindfulness. So what you see here are the 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, and it starts with the core pillar, which is self-awareness. And the idea behind emotional intelligence is that the better you know yourself, the better you know what your patterns are, what your preferences are, what best supports you, and how best to manage the things that you know about yourself. So the idea is the better you know yourself in the work environment, especially, the better you know how to set yourself up for success, how to ask for what you need and communicate clearly, and then also become more and more aware of your own patterns that either are supporting you or getting in your way. Now, the other 2 pillars of emotional intelligence are social awareness or group awareness, and social management or group management. And so why is that important? Well, most of us work with other people. And so the idea is to really flex that muscle and pay more and more attention to what is happening in the teams that we're working on in relationship in this context to functionality around time and task management, and what is going to help that group succeed. And so the more attention you pay to that, the better you're going to be able to manage it. And so, so that self-awareness being the starting point, self-management comes out of self-awareness. Social awareness or group awareness comes from really noticing what's happening in a group and on a team, and with your colleagues and supervisors, and then how best to manage what you're finding in relationship to really fine-tune task and time management. Also want to acknowledge that each and every single one of us are unique. And so we're going to come at tools and resources differently. We're going to experience those tools and resources differently based on how visible we need things to be. Whether we are best organized in kind of a visual chaos or chronology, and then what support looks like to each and every single one of us. And so understanding what support looks like, how to ask for it, including when you're setting up new tools for yourself, letting a trusted colleague know what you're trying to do so you can have some accountability in that pursuit. So what is our lay of the land? For most of us, our time is managed not just by our role and responsibility, but also in response to others. And so many of us may work in open spaces. We may be at the beck and call of individuals or teams. And so a lot of our time is in that reaction phase. And so just wanting to acknowledge that when you look at traditional tips for time and task management, there's some core assumptions that I don't think are always true for folks, which in this case is, for all of us who work with, you either work directly for folks or in support of folks, time may not always feel like it's ours, but I'm going to share some tricks and tools to kind of reframe that and take control even of the things that are kind of the known unknowns. And at the end of the day, really, this is about reframing time and really looking at time through the lens of intention and finding ways to find balance and finding intention in the work that needs to get done, instead of getting caught up in that stream of busyness and that stream of just kind of mastering task chaos. So the most important question to start with is really looking at, where does time go? Many, many times in my life, I know that I've gotten to the end of the day and just wondered, oh my goodness, what happened that day or that week? And so I want to start with just acknowledging time stealers. And so the topmost in the work environment, whether you're working from home or you're in an office setting, are distractions. Procrastination, which can come from lots of different places, including not really being sure of what goals or priorities are, or having something that feels too big to accomplish and so not knowing where to start. Another item is working on the wrong thing at the wrong time. So time during the day and paying attention to your own energy and motivation and where you're the most productive really matters. And then another piece is actually working on the right thing for too long. Sometimes the more time we give to something, the less effective and efficient we are in working on it. Sleep plays into a huge part of being focused and working with intention, and then losing focus due to distraction and being in that reactive space. So not really harnessing your ability to plan everything that you can anticipate. Also wanted to start with something that I don't think is talked about enough, which is often in our work culture, multitasking is seen as something that is a highly valued skill. You see it on job postings a lot, can multitask well. And the truth is, actually, multitasking is a time stealer, an attention stealer. It affects our creativity. It actually affects our ability to get work done. So just wanted, there's lots of different studies that have been done. This particular author just noted that for the more you try to divide your attention and time, actually, the less effective and efficient that you are. And anytime you are jumping in between things, it actually takes anywhere between 15 and 25 minutes to reorient yourself to a bigger or more primary task. And so that efficiency you're looking for in really harnessing time can drop by as much as 40%. And so wanted to do a little bit of myth busting there. And so where does the time go? So pick a week in the next couple weeks and set yourself up with a calendar for the week that's divided into 15-minute segments, and really track for that week with an open mind what is happening in that whole week. And 15-minute segments will give you enough detail to really understand what kind of tasks you're attending to, how long it's taking. Are there patterns that you can see of where you're doing what kind of work, how much time you're spending on reactive or intentional tasks, and then what are your distractions? And so tasks basically fall into 4 different categories. Things that you know that are recurring, that either have to be done every day, every week, or once a month or quarter. You have one-off tasks. You have deadline-driven tasks if you're working in support of projects or programs. And then you have the ongoing urgent tasks where somebody's showing up at your door and asking for something that has to be done right away. And so as you map out your week in those 15-minute increments, categorize the type of tasks that are happening, and then really look at what are all the different categories of work and projects that are on your plate. How much time does each of those tasks take? What are you noticing about time wasters? What are some of the triggers that tend to bring you into feeling or being distracted? And then pay attention to the day of the week or time of day where you're feeling most productive or unproductive. And so at the end of that week of looking at all of this, you are going to have a lot of information about kind of what you've been experiencing up until this point. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that information and feed it into a purpose-driven plan around time and task management. So I wanted to share some really great tips that are on a blog called The Productivity Club. And so these of everything that I've come across really reflect some of the areas that can help us fine-tune the way that we manage our time. And so the idea of not just doing a task and letting it take whatever time it is, but actually tracking your time, aligning goals and how much time you're actually spending. If you are working on something, really getting in tune with, is this what I should be working on right now based on my energy level and based on what the priorities and goals are? There's going to be times of day where you do your best work and where you're feeling like, a little bit tired. And so separate focused work from distracted work. Have an end time for every task that you're working on to really get a better sense of how much time each thing takes. Find your distraction triggers. For things that are routine, if you find that a certain routine task takes an hour, try to do that in a little bit less time and see what happens. And so shorten that time. A lot of what's been found is if you know that something takes an hour, challenge yourself to do it in 50 minutes or 45 and see what happens. And it activates a different part of the brain, and it tends to make you more effective, more efficient, and more creative in tackling that thing that you've got to tackle over and over again. Every single day, have a mini plan. Don't wait for the exact hour to begin. Just start when you need to start. And then the 2-minute rule is if something can be done in under 2 minutes, set that aside for your distracted time of day and then do it during that time, because it's things that you can just do and get done. A lot of people give the advice of saying no. And I think more realistic is understanding what's being asked. And so, we all work in cooperative and collaborative environments, no matter what we're doing. Saying no, I don't think is actually the most effective and the most informative way to find out what is being asked. And so instead, if you have something new that's coming on your plate, find out as much as what you can about it before you say yes. Kind of map it out, figure out where it fits in, and then with whoever you need to communicate with, talk about the impacts, and then say, okay, here's the priorities that I have. This is where it looks like it'll fit. What's the right priority, and what can I set aside and maybe do later instead? And so maybe instead of saying no, really look at understanding the impact of whatever is being added to your plate and really truly getting enough sleep. So new strategy comes with really knowing yourself, and pay attention to times of day and days of the week where you have the most energy, you feel the most productive, the most motivated, and set aside that time in blocks for focused tasks that are going to require a lot of your attention. Also pay attention to where you have the least amount of energy, and it's not that you do nothing with that time. That's probably the time that you need to take a break, nourish, reconnect with people, move your body, do simple tasks like ease your follow-up calls, check your meeting notes, organize follow-up, do your 2-minute tasks, update your to-do list. Now, all of us have a wide variety of projects. With the really big projects, it's important to really understand what are all the different elements of the projects. And so what I found to be the most impactful way to plan is you start at the end and you move back to, you start at the end and then move back to the beginning. So what is it you're trying to accomplish? And then what are the key milestones or stages and known deadlines along the way? And then to reach each of those, then you start mapping out the tasks of the pieces that you have the responsibility for. And then you take all those pieces and you chart that into tasks, milestones, deadlines, into a planning calendar with as much visibility as you need to feel successful. So getting started. So what I would challenge each of you to do is set aside the first 15 minutes of every day to set your daily goals, if it's a Monday or whatever day of the week you start. For the first day of the week you start, set up your weekly goals, and then spend the next 15 minutes setting your daily goals. So outline all the tasks and deadlines, assign a priority even for your daily goals, estimate a time that you think you're going to need for each, and then block that time out. Also, based on what you learned in your week-long tracker, look at for your known unknowns, like what is the reality, how much of your time is spent reacting to folks and requests, and then acknowledge that time so it doesn't always feel like it's pulling and tugging at everything else that you're doing. And then at the end of every day, update your to-do list, cheer for the successes, and then if you have the time or energy, plan your to-do for the next day or save that for the start of the next day. Setting time limits for each task is really important. Otherwise, how do you know how much time it's taking and also how much time to block out in the future for those things? And then visual tools, whether they're digital or paper, to chart and track everything that you're doing can really help bring you back to focus when you get pulled by distractions in your work environment. And then, you know, I know there's offers with all different technology to set reminders for everything. You know, really ask yourself, what is it that you actually need a reminder for? And I would say prioritize the critical and time-sensitive tasks first. And then set up a system that works for you. If you have a system that you like, that's working, then monitor that for 30 days and really see like where you're, you know, what is supporting your success and what might be getting in your way. Tweak is needed, and there's a lot of tools out there that you can try. Any tool you try, give it 30 days and then see, you know, how you would like to shift that up and change that, and then share what you're learning with your colleagues. Time blocking. So all of the most successful entrepreneurs and CEOs use time blocking. And a friend of mine used to call this the eye bleeder. And so be sensitive to colors that work for you. But the idea is to set up, to block out your entire day and set aside blocks of time based on the things that you want to work on, based on what needs to get done, your priorities, your goals, and also what you know about yourself, including everything that nourishes yourself. So you want to block out time to get away from your desk. You want to block out time for taking a walk and getting your body moving. And then also, you know, making it known to others, like how you're organizing your time so they know when it's okay to pop in and connect or ask a question, and then when you actually do not want to be disturbed. And so the idea is, you know, when you look at all the different things on your plate, assign the key topics and categories a color, and then use that color system so that you can really see like what is the time that you've set aside to work on those things, and then adjust as needed. Distractions are everywhere. I like to say technology is the bane of our success. It's really amazing. We're here today on GoToMeeting using our computers and video cameras and potentially phones, but these are also a source of distraction. And so managing that, even in roles where you're in support of somebody else, it's okay to negotiate time where you really know that you need to focus. And so if you're somebody who has a responsibility of answering a phone, asking if there is a time of day when you can share that duty with somebody else so that you can really have, you know, uninterrupted focus time. So where do you start? You start with knowing what is. So identify all possible distractions, make a plan to manage each of those. Limit, if you can, the number of times you check your email or your phone or other devices, and then pay attention to the time of day when you're going to do your most focused work, and use every single type of device has a do not disturb option where you can set that to a timer and where you won't get pinged, you won't get buzzed, whether it's an instant message, instant message communication tool, whether it's your phone, your watch. Turn off as much as you can to do not disturb. And then when you're doing that timed and focused work, put away smart devices, and then use a timer that is outside of those devices. And then in a visible way, so that you're clearly communicating with others, hang a sign or post for colleagues and letting them know that you're in that focused work time and that you really wish not to be interrupted. And you can even include, okay, from this time to this time, this is really, when I want to not be interrupted. And then communicate that so that they know what you're trying to do. They can help support you in managing distractions, and then let you know maybe what's working for them. And all of these things that you'll learn as you really look into how are you spending your time, what is taking, where are you having to spend reactive time versus intentional time, and really thinking about what you need in terms of minimizing distractions. Start thinking about like who you need to communicate with to help manage expectations and boundaries and ask clearly for what you need. So one of the things that will come out of really looking at that detailed view of your week is a stop doing list. And this is a list of either tasks that maybe don't belong on your list. Maybe it's things that you're doing that are getting in your own way in terms of creating distraction or kind of generating that energy that contributes to procrastination. And so the idea is just keeping this list somewhere and just continuing to jot down the things that you're going to actively say, you know what, I'm going to really work hard and stop doing this. Or this is the list of things I want to communicate either with my team or my boss about, to say, here's the things that are really getting in the way of me being my most productive and effective and efficient self. And busyness really comes from a lack of planning. And so, and having so much of our time be in reaction to. And so everything that, and a lot of times the busyness is filler, so we're doing things to either feel successful or fill time, and to feel like we're making progress on things even in these short windows. And so really checking the things that you would categorize under busyness and look at, okay, where does this actually fit, and are these things that I need to keep doing? So getting organized. Lots of different strategies and tools out there. When you really set up and make your big list of all of the different tasks and projects that are on your plate, here's a couple different filters to think through those tasks. And so this particular model basically allots tasks to 4 different categories. So it's the 4D model. And the idea is, what can you do right away? What can you defer that's going to require a little bit more time or planning? Is everything that's on your plate, should it be on your plate? Is there anything that you can delegate or collaborate on? And then is there anything that really doesn't belong there? Another version of this is called the Eisenhower decision matrix, and it's looking at, okay, this is around prioritization. So what's important versus not important, or front burner, back burner, what's urgent or not urgent, and really looking at, what this is also to help with prioritization, like what has to be done right away. Oh, I'm tracking, I've got a calendar and I'm tracking deadlines over the next couple months. Oh, wow, that's really coming up. Here's the things that absolutely, no matter what, have to be done either today or this week. And then here are the things that are going to take more time. And so scheduling time to do that. So one of the systems that I love is called Kanban. And essentially what it does is it's a way to break down an individual project or a series of projects and tasks and putting every individual task on a Post-it note. And then depending on the type of industry you're in, depending on the type of task it is, the most simple Kanban chart, and it's meant to be super visual, and it's meant so that you can move your Kanban cards or your Post-it notes around. And the idea is that it's active, it's interactive, you're constantly aware of and interacting with all the different pieces. And so whether you have a Kanban per project or you have a Kanban for your whole body of work, the idea is to look at what is all of the things to do, what needs to be done today, what needs to be done this week, and so that today, this week, is in the doing category, is basically what's underway or in progress. And then having a space for acknowledging what's been accomplished, because I think that's an important visual cue as well. And then based on the type of project that you're working on, people adapt Kanban systems to include things that they know need to happen, like getting approval from others, so you can move that there. It's if you're working on something that's going out the door or something published, the review process. So looking at like, what is it in your industry? How do you create categories that make the most sense for what you're doing? And then actively interacting with the tasks that need to get done. Oops, sorry. A little sticky. And then you have all of these known tasks. You figured out what's urgent, what's not urgent. You have your big list. You have your to-do list. You've got your goals for the day, your priorities for the day. And now it comes to doing the work. One of the most effective tools to getting the work done is called the Pomodoro Technique. It's an Italian technique. And essentially the idea is that whatever the task is that you're working on, that you set aside 25 minutes and you just work on that singular task uninterrupted, and then you take a short break. And then if it's something that is going to take more than 25 minutes to do, that to continue to block out that time to do it. And then at the end of repeating those sessions, then you take a longer break. And the idea is it keeps you focused, get more done. And that 25 minutes is kind of a sweet spot for being able to, especially uninterrupted, to hyper-focused and really dive in to get the thing that you need to get done. So something to try. So many tools out there, old school and digital. Want to talk a little bit about kind of what's available to us. And so, you know, in a typical office setting or from Office Depot, we've got all of our physical tactile tools like a whiteboard, which can be used to do mind mapping or task mapping to really kind of chart out and write out as you're figuring out, okay, how do you break down the individual pieces that you want to plot and assign a time to. Post-it notes. Post-it notes obviously are great for reminders. They're great for prompts. Also, obviously, can be used in a Kanban system. Having a visible multi-month calendar on the wall, separate from your computer, where you're noting key deadlines. And then Outlook has, and you know, the different email tools have the ability where you can chart out blocks of time and color code them, whether you're using, you know, a notepad or OneNote or however you take notes, basically making sure that you've got a space that you love to work in where you can do daily goals and prioritize your tasks. And then having a clock, and whether it's on your desk or or on the wall, that's separate from any technology. So you have a way of tracking time that's not independent from the things that are going to come with all of our known distractions. And music, you know, for those of us, there tends to be two categories: those of us who work best in silence and those of us who work best with a little bit of music in the background. Music has been shown to really boost creativity and trigger parts of the brain that helps us think through creative problems. So having a music source, if that works for you, and a headset so that you're keeping that to yourself and honoring the quiet space for others. For me, music is a huge distraction, and so I've always used earplugs. And even when I'm in an office where I can shut the door, the earplugs help me get into my head, into a focused space. And so if you've never tried that trick, you know, check it out and see if that works for you as a way when you're doing those hyper-focused kind of time-managed tasks, that to see what is different. You know, try it with and try it without them, and see what changes, if anything does, and if that's a system that'll work for you. Okay, digital tools. There are so many. A lot of them are, you may already be using. Most of these that I'm suggesting are free. The basic versions of them are, there is one that is that you do pay monthly for, which is Toggle, and that's a productivity tracker. But the first one is NTask. It's a project and a task tracker. Tick looks at task and calendar management. Rescue Time really helps you see where you're spending time or not spending time so that you have more choices. So the more visible your behaviors are, the more you can really look at that and make some choices. MindNode, mind mapping is a really, if you've never used mind mapping, it's a really powerful tool. There's some great YouTube videos that talk about how to do it. And when you're in the stage of really figuring out what are all the different pieces related to a project that you need to identify tasks for. Mind mapping is a great way to do it. You don't need to use an app, but this is a wonderful app where you can. Trello is another project task tracker. Todoist is a task list organizer. Focus Keeper is based on the Pomodoro technique, and so it helps you organize and align the work that needs to get done into those 25-minute segments. If you're super curious and you want to dive into what are your habits, Loop is a way that helps you look at what are your goals versus what you're actually doing. Another to-do list manager is called Remember the Milk. There's another timer. There's a timer tool that you can use to time out your tasks. So it's called the Be Focused Timer, and then Toggle, which is productivity. So mindfulness. At the end of the day, our ability to manage what's in our environment has everything to do with how we're showing up. And how we're showing up is influenced by how much sleep we're getting, our level of stress, how focused we are or have the ability to be, how much energy we have. And so there's a couple different elements to building a mindfulness practice, one of which is really noticing, what is it that grounds you? For some people, it's exercise. For some people, it's journaling. For some people, it's list making and organizing. For other folks, it really is about being quiet and finding that still place to just be and breathe. And so at the end of the day, when you think about kind of what's happening in your work environment, a lot of times it's not really about time management. It's about what is happening with your focus and your ability to stay, in the here and now and in the moment with the things that need to get done. And so setting up a meditation practice is a really great way to set aside, even if it's 5 minutes every day, and just ground yourself. And there's tons of, if you've never done meditation before, there's so many different apps out there that have many different types of guided meditations. And then, so Calm has all different kinds of services. Buddhify I use because it organizes the different types of meditation based on what it is that you need. So some of it is just, getting quiet and stillness. Some of it is managing stress. Some of it is kind of hitting that recharge into energy. So Buddhify is something that I highly recommend, but I've also used Calm and Insight Timer and find those to be really helpful too. Smiling Mind is another mindfulness app, 10% Happier. And then if you're super curious about meditation, Headspace is, of all of these, it's the one that charges a fee for, and what it does is it offers like pretty formal classes about how to meditate. And so why does meditation matter? If you are entering your workspace feeling frazzled, feeling stressed, what that means is your attention is basically in that fight or flight mode, and it's not in that cognitive space. And so, being able to enter your work, having dispelled a little bit of energy and grounding yourself will allow you to really refocus and give yourself the tools and the energy and the grounding that is going to help you enter your environment with your best intention. And so, a lot of what I talked about today, especially if you're going to try out different systems, whether it's a digital system or an app or even a new physical system where you're kind of re-envisioning how you want to manage your tasks and your time in your work environment, something that is important to acknowledge, especially as adults in learning, is that anytime you're trying something new, you're always starting with probably a feeling of, but the reality of incompetence. And so unconscious incompetence is when you're not aware that you're learning. And then as you're starting to do something new, you enter into a space of conscious incompetence. So you're aware that you're learning, you may not be as good as you want to be yet at it. And then that's where the practicing comes in. And that's why I recommend anything that you try for 30 days to really have time to observe in yourself, like what is changing, what isn't changing, what's working, what's getting in your way. And so as you practice that, just like anything, whether it's learning a new musical instrument or learning a new sport, you gain confidence as you gain competence. And so you are still actively engaged in the learning process. It's getting easier. You're flexing those muscles. And eventually where you're going to end up is setting up a system that is running on its own. And so you're transitioning from a place of having maybe tools that aren't working as well as you like, or a system that's not working as well as you like, to actively transitioning to something that works better for you. And so you get into a place of what's called unconscious competence, where that's what takes over, and that's your new routine, and that's just the way that you get things done. And so as adults, we're always in some stage of learning, no matter what we're doing, and no matter how long we've been in the roles that we've been in. And the goal is always to commit ourselves to practicing something long enough where all of a sudden we forget that we're practicing it anymore. And that's how you know that you kind of gained the highest point of unconscious competence and confidence in your new system or tool. I wanted to give time for questions. And so I know that I covered a lot of ground. I talked about a lot of different tools. And so I'm going to stop there and give time for whatever questions folks had. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see the chat.
All right.
And I don't see any questions, and so I'm just going to open it up for questions and just see and start there.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to, you reminded me how important that daily list is. I used to be really good at sitting down and making myself a list and crossing things off, and I fell out of practice of that, and I need to get back to it. It does make a difference.
Well, and I have a colleague, and she's been an executive director of a nonprofit for a couple decades, and she starts her every day with her big list, and she rewrites it every day just to keep it present and fresh. And then she notes on every day's list, I think she used different highlighters, like what she wanted to focus on that day, and then use colors to like identify priorities.
Mine wasn't that detailed, but I did find it a helpful practice. Yes.
I liked the suggestion, because I do a daily list, but I seem to lose track of the bigger strategic things that, so having, like, I liked that Kanban because it's visual, and so you can have like your quarterly or your big strategic goals, and then separate from that, like the actual to-do tasks.
Yep.
So you aren't misplacing those big things.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy, depending on where you're coming from a planning perspective. Some of us like swimming in the weeds, and we'll have you can end up with dozens of Post-its, and so managing that can get overwhelming. And so your idea of saving the Post-its to just have, okay, here's our big picture, and here's the key pieces. And so Kanban can be used in so many different creative ways, and is something, if you work in a lean environment, it's used often in complement to Scrum, so to managing productivity. So.
And then I was also reminded about I'm a recovering multitasker, and it's pretty amazing hearing how I'm actually not very productive. So that's always a good reminder, and I think particularly difficult in our industry when many of us multitask for a living. So if we don't have a choice but to multitask, we're answering the phone and we're, responding to IMs, and we're, are there any pointers for how to do it better, or how to minimize it was particularly scary that my long-term memory would suffer.
Yeah, and creativity. I mean, it's really in it, and what in a lot of the long-term studies that have been done, it actually shows that you're losing time throughout the day, because to get back to those tasks that actually take a little bit more time and attention, that's why I think the strategy is really identifying first, okay, what's going to take hyper-focused attention versus the things that are fast. And so for those of us who, have been in environments where multitasking is either needed or really honored, what I've noticed is a lot of things that fall under that multitasking category fall into those 2-minute tasks, right? So the stuff that you can just get done. And so the idea is that, you know, it's a reframe of, okay, you know, during that block of time in a day where you're not really feeling as productive, or it's set aside for doing the stuff that just like doesn't take a lot of time, that's where you put those things. Or once an hour, you break down the hour where you've got like 25 minutes for focus time, a 5-minute break, and then 15 minutes to just do the stuff that basically you can just, you know, get those simple things done. And then you're bringing yourself back to focus, because the idea is just being more intentional about what's happening in your day. And that key question of, okay, you know, do I need to be doing what I'm doing right now, right? We're in our pattern of multitasking. And so anytime we have a pattern, we have choices. And so, you know, as you're finding yourself in that mode, it's like, oh, okay, is this the time of day that I need to do those 2-minute tasks, you know, or is there another reason why I'm multitasking, you know, and could I move that someplace else? And so maybe try that on and see what you notice. There's a couple questions. So Sherry, so method to inform coworkers who are unintentionally interrupting you that you're busy. So on the technology front, there's all different ways where you can set up like a timed do not disturb. And so, you know, if you're on Teams, obviously the instant message piece goes nonstop. So letting your team know basically when you need a block of time that's uninterrupted. So that's the first big piece, is communication. And then sticking to that and setting up, you know, for those times, just putting on that do not disturb. And then if you are in an office environment, creating a sign, you know, you can have as much fun with it as you want or be as serious as you need to be, and just say, okay, when this sign is up or when this red light is up, you know, that's when, you know, and then set like, okay, I'm blocking out this uninterrupted time. And so you can, it's not that I'm permanently unavailable, it's that I'm going to be available again and then let people know. And so again, it's around communication, and it's setting boundaries for you. And then if you're working in an environment where people keep interrupting you, you can just say, hey, I'm trying something new to really stay focused on this task. Do you mind if I get, you know, and just letting them know what you're doing. And so I think that transparency in it lets people know that that's okay in that environment, but also it gives people a sense of, oh shoot, you know, I didn't want to interrupt you. Like, I see that you're going to be available during this time. I'll come back, you know, when that's a better time. And so, you know, I know Georgianne, you've got somebody that you work with that, you know, she's front desk, you know, and so it's all interrupted time. And so as she tried on, you know, different projects and roles, what she negotiated was when she's working on a dedicated focused project, that she gets to be away from the desk, and that the calling is routed to somebody else, and that somebody else is on point to, you know, deal with the UPS folks and deliveries and people visiting the office. So it's about communication and negotiation and just seeing what's possible in your work environment, and be ready to talk about like why that's so important to you, and just share what you've learned about yourself. It's like, you know, I'm noticing that to do this task, I really need some uninterrupted time. And so being more and more aware of what you need. Sherry, did that help? Okay. Okay, so Judy, yeah, great question. Electronic tools are persnickety, and I'm old school. You know, I started with paper. I still use paper. I have used some digital tools and tried that out, and some of that works for me. And I had the same fear. And what I realized is the question you want to talk to in your work environment with your IT person is, what does storage and backup look like? Because in a work environment, there should be a really clear plan to be able to get that information back. And so, and if it's an individual app that you've downloaded on your phone or on your computer, it's worth looking at, especially if they've got a contact information or chat, basically like how do you access something, you know, when the technology goes sideways, which as we all know, it can. And so the best backup plan is don't lose your big list. And so if you have digitized your big list on whatever frequency you think makes the most sense to you, I would print that out so that you have it, and or if you have a thumb drive, save it on a thumb drive so that you've got kind of a digital backup of what that is. Now, with some of these apps and tools, how do you back up within the app? I think each tool is a little bit different, and in each work environment, the integration within like your current computing system, you know, I would just catch your IT person and see what she or he says about, you know, what the access is to information shared there. And a lot of times, if there's an enterprise tool, you know, if there's something that you try and ends up becoming a tool used system-wide or organization-wide, then they're typically that comes with kind of a larger use of that tool and paid services, which it's easier for recovery. So, but at the very least, with your big list, just not something to lose. And then, you know, on my phone, like if I have something that I'm really afraid of losing, I'll take a picture of it, and then it's just saved in another digital platform. Okay.
Candy, I have a question.
Yeah. Yep.
So first, I'd love to share that one of the tools that Candy shared with me when I was complaining about being over busy and not getting stuff done was just to pay attention, like you said earlier, to what I actually did. You know, I had time blocked out on my calendar, and then that's not what I did. And so she was like, well, write down what you actually did. You know, so I just moved stuff to tomorrow on my calendar. So I blocked time out. And that was hugely informative to help with the other parts that you suggested, which are, when am I creative? You know, when am I tired?
Yep.
And so as I noticed that the stuff I moved was like at 3 o'clock when I was about to work on the spreadsheet from hell. You know, it's like, no, I should do that 8 a.m. when I'm on first call. You know, that's just how it should work. So, but my question for you, and this is where I'm still struggling, is if I'm still looking at, you know, I know I'm not actually working on my goals. I know I'm doing a lot of things that are important and I get them done, but my goals, my biggest ones, are suffering. So the idea is that how do you stop doing, you know, how do you it's like if you're too busy, how do you take time to figure out how to not be too busy? And I have a feeling it's going to be sort of like the 5-minute meditation thing. You know, if you're not able to meditate 5 minutes a day, you probably need to meditate 30 minutes a day. That was like one of the things the yoga teacher told me. So, so I guess, you know, is there some?
And there's, yeah. So one of the things that is constantly in tension is short-term, long-term. It's kind of what's in front of me, that urgency, the one-off things, the things that are just coming. And when you really sit down and pick a week where you want to track everything, pay attention to what percentage of your time is reactive and what percentage of your time can be intentional. And so that you're making space for, you know, if you have a job where 40% of your time is constantly, you know, needing to be reactive, then that's the reality of your job. And so acknowledging that and making space for that and saying, okay, well then 60% of every day I can spend on the other things that need to get done, and have that be an active part of your communication with your team and with your supervisor. It's like, okay, this is what I'm acknowledging about what it takes to do this work. Is there anything that you see differently, or is there anything, you know, so you're just checking in with, okay, I want to be available to what's coming, and I also want to be intentional about what can be planned. And then within, let's say in that example, the 60% space, that either once a week you carve out an hour to start with, or once a month you carve out a couple hours where you're looking at the pieces that really take more time, that are part of the long-term, you know, planning. And I know, Georgianne, as being a department manager, you've got to have that dual view of what's right now and what's ahead. And so in every role, you have that opportunity to do that. And I would say, again, it's, you know, what is your whole job? And if your whole job includes needing to look ahead and need to plan, then block that out and include it in what you're doing. Because if you're not, then, you know, you're basically ignoring something that, you know, is part of your job anyway. And it's easy to feel at the whim, or at the behest of all of these things pulling you in a million different directions. And so the idea of harnessing time is, you know, exercise, beginning your day with exercise, or even if it's a walk. So basically, like, you know, having a release point, starting your day with a meditation, organizing yourself, setting goals, setting your priorities, understanding, okay, what can be done in this day or what can be done in this week. And then if there's stuff that you're not getting to, you're not getting to it for a reason. You know, it's basically, and so that's when you need to say, hey, you know, there's, you know, I need some help, I need some support. Here's the things that are always falling off my plate. And so pay attention to those things too. And, you know, because if it's part of your job, if it's part of your role and responsibility, then it needs to fit in somewhere. Something that I didn't have a chance to share yet is that other studies have shown that working more doesn't make you more productive. As the idea of, oh, I'm just going to put in a few more hours, I'm going to put in a few more hours. Well, all of us need to do that during a crunch time, during a deadline, every once in a while. But if you are in the habit of working more than 40 hours, know that you lose 40% of your productivity in that 41st hour. And so it's it doesn't serve you, it doesn't serve your productivity, it doesn't serve whatever it is you're working on. And it's a way also to carve out a boundary for your time and space. I've worked at a startup, I've worked for a Fortune 200 company, you know, where the expectations was everybody works, you know, 50 hours a week, and, you know, you do your best in the environment that you're in. But I would say if you have a choice and you have the ability to advocate for yourself and communicate, know that you're going to be your most productive self in 40 hours. And in fact, when you are harvesting time by challenging yourself to do a known task in a shorter amount of time, it does trigger another part of the brain. And so, you know, notice when you're getting in the routine of something and pop out of it and try something new, and just to see what happens. And what you'll find is you are more attentive to what's right in front of you, you're more grounded, and you're able to do more because you're right here and right now, versus having your mind scattered in a million different places and potentially, you know, in worst case scenario, in that fight or flight mode where you're not really able to think cognitively or creatively anyway. So
I used to fight against that structure, that, you know, because like I wanted to do my job my way, and eventually I realized that I need to bend to the structure.
yeah.
So we have a 4 o'clock rule. There's no thinking after 4 o'clock. That is just availability. After 4 o'clock is availability for the fires that inevitably come up after 4 o'clock. So there is I have no planned activities after 4 o'clock.
That's brilliant.
It's filing, it's tidying up my desk, it's, you know, deleting my email. It's just those 2-minute tasks, I guess you call them. My best time of day is in the morning. No number crunching, 100%. Yeah. On board. All of my thinking time happens in the morning because my boss is an afternoon guy. And so I know that I need to be available for the afternoon, immediate things that are going to interrupt my focus time. So once I just accepted that, it became a lot easier. And now my meetings, I schedule my meetings for 9 and 10 in the morning. Those are my meetings. You know, and then after that, after lunch in the afternoon, my days become much looser because for me, that's the structure I work in.
That's awesome. And that's a great example.
Yeah.
And
there's the stress off. I'm just as busy, but I'm not stressed about it.
Exactly. And stress's impact on the brain is super interesting. And if you're bored, look up the amygdala hijack. It's what happens to our brains when we're stressed. And basically, our brains have not evolved much beyond the way we needed to be during prehistoric times. And so stress in the modern environment actually forces the brain to turn off its cognitive function so that we can only be reactive. And so, you know, paying attention to what's stressful in your environment and minimizing that, you know, stress is also a distraction to manage. The other thing to think about is, so 2 other pieces quickly, and I know we've only got a couple more minutes, but, you know, some meetings have to take an hour, right? That's just like what the content takes, but challenge yourself to carve out 15 minutes before a meeting to really sit with the prep so you're ready with whatever it is you need to bring into that space, and you know, you have everything set that you need to get out of that meeting or whatever you need to present. And then if you can, see if you can manage meetings within 45 or 50 minutes so that it gives everybody either a chance for a biological break, but more than anything, so that you have that 10 minutes is still dedicated to that meeting, but that's where you can do your immediate follow-up or place the follow-up where it needs to live, so that then you're not later in the day or later in the week, oh gosh, what did we meet about? What needed to happen? You know, what are the takeaways? And so it's just another way while it's fresh, and basically doing something about it as soon as you can, even if it's just noting like what needs to be done. Yeah, bio breaks are very important. So the other piece that I was going to say is, for the recurring tasks, especially ones that you find yourself reacting to, do that first, and do it first thing and get it off your plate, because the impact of the stress of knowing that it's coming and knowing that you got to do it, and gosh, I really don't want to do it, but I have to do it every day or every week, like that is such a great release valve. And so schedule those things when you're fresh and early, so that it's out of the way and you're not finding ways to avoid it. Because that's where fun and procrastination can really play havoc. And so 4 minutes. Other questions? Did I catch everybody's notes?
So far.
Awesome. Okay. Let's see. Somebody asked about strategies of soft skill approaches to communication. Soft skills begin with owning why something is important to you. And you don't need to be super mushy about it. You can be as direct as you want to be, but it's basically treating another person like a human being, having them see as a human being and say, you know what, for me, this is really important because, and is that, and I'm going to need your support, or I'm going to need your help. So if there's an ask, they're great. It doesn't need to have an ask, but basically starting with the idea of letting people know what you're doing, so transparency, and letting people know why it's important to you, and then having some fun with it. And if you've negotiated that, like you've got a 2-hour block every day where you don't want to be interrupted, then come up with like some fun way to communicate that visually, just as a reminder for folks, because people are people and often they'll forget. And maybe it's a stoplight, maybe it's like, hey, do not disturb, genius at work. Whatever way for you is a meaningful way to say, hey, everybody, reminder, this is my time. It doesn't mean that I'm unavailable forever, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when I have to do that, my door is always open, but when I do have to shut it, I try to put a time, in a meeting for 1 hour, or, in a meeting from 1 to 2 or whatever. Just, it seems to help my staff go, oh, I'll just come back in 20 minutes. Not a big deal.
Yep. And over communicating, you have nothing to lose, really. I mean, as long as you're not in a super toxic environment, over communicating actually helps people understand where you're coming from and what you need and what you're doing, but it also helps you model for others what's okay. So
awesome. Great information. Candy, thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll send you the PDF, and all the tools and resources are there, and use what you need and leave the rest.
Wonderful. All right. If there's no more questions, I will go ahead and close us out. Thank you again, Candy. Thank you so much. This was a great presentation. I think I have a long list of tools to look up now. But I'm very grateful for the tips and the suggestions, and I hope everybody learned a lot today. We'll get this uploaded and links and the slides sent out as soon as I can. All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you
again, and I'm here as a resource.
Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. All right. Enjoy your afternoon.
Bye.